Welcome to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. I'm Scott, and joining me is our go-to leadership guru, Dr. Michael David Morales, known to many as...
Man, thanks. Let's do it, dude.
So today's story takes us to space. So in the heart of space, what began as kind of a routine mission quickly spirals into a terrifying crisis when an oxygen tank explodes above the Apollo 13 spacecraft. They were stranded 200,000 miles from Earth with limited resources and no clear way to return home. Astronauts Jim Lovell, Fred Haise, and Jack Swigert were thrust into a fight for survival as the hours ticked by. The crew had to rely on their wits, teamwork, and unshakable determination to stay alive. So on the ground, Flight Director Gene Kranz and his team at Mission Control faced an unprecedented challenge. They'd never experienced something like this before. So with lives on the line, every single decision became a matter of life or death. Kranz was a seasoned leader at that point, and he was forced to summon all of his leadership skills to guide his team through this crisis. He knows that really to succeed, he has to not only act quickly, but also has to foster an environment of resilience and agility within his team. Under extreme pressure, he encourages his team to stay calm, to think creatively, and to be flexible, thinking outside the box and adapting their strategies with each new piece of information that comes in. So as they worked kind of around the clock to troubleshoot one problem after another, Kranz's ability really to lead with resilience became clear. So he refused to give up. And even when the odds seemed like they were just going downhill, he inspired his team to kind of push and push and push. And the flight crew and the engineers on the ground had to just constantly shift their tactics and adapt, pivot from one solution to the next, and show really that adaptability and leadership is just as crucial as perseverance in overcoming kind of this impossible situation. So the story is really just such a great example of just how building resilience and agility and leadership, knowing when to adapt, when to remain steadfast and how to inspire others through uncertainty really kind of becomes the difference between failure and success. And ultimately, it's the unwavering commitment kind of to problem solving and teamwork, kind of coupled with that resilience to face every single challenge head on that turns an almost certain tragedy into a remarkable triumph of human ingenuity and spirit. And also, might add, an amazing Tom Hanks film.
It really is. Yeah,
it is. I feel like people forget about it all the time. But today kind of leads us into, we're talking a whole heck of a lot about resilience and agility and building that within leadership. And so, Mo, why don't you kind of take us away with that first point of today?
Great story. I love the entire movie. I loved that movie when it came out. I still love it. Our first point today is this: leaders cultivate emotional intelligence, also known as EQ, to build resilience. And so let me give you a little bit of a statistical insight. Leaders with high emotional intelligence are going to outperform others. According to one study by Talent Smart, EQ is responsible for 58% of success in all types of jobs. And leaders with high EQ are 70% more likely to manage stress and foster team morale during challenges and do it effectively. So, Scott, let me ask my first question to you today. Have you ever been stressed out at work?
Yeah, you know what? I just don't feel like work's stressful at all in the slightest. Obviously, I'm kidding. I mean, you know the field that I work in, and it is incredibly consistently stressful. I mean, we were just literally talking, right before we started recording about how, I'm headed into postseason with the team, and it's postseason is stressful. It's week to week. It's win or go home, and it's a completely different mindset, different stress when you get to that kind of postseason vibe.
It really is. And for what you do, Scott, as an athletic trainer, it's hands-on. It happens right away. You can't just think of something and say, oh, you have it looks like you might have a sprained ankle or it might be broken. Well, let's figure that out in the next 24 hours. No, you're on the sideline. You've got to figure it out. You've got to let the coach know, can this kid continue on or does it need to go out? That's stressful. Yep. And so for our leaders, you might not be like Scott on the sideline, and I think it's snowing where you're at right now, right? And it might snow this weekend at your game.
Yeah, I just got a warning. I just got a warning on my phone about incoming snow. So yes.
Yeah. So again, that adds another layer, no pun intended, of snow and stress. Whether you're sitting in an office or whether you're on a football field or whatever you're doing with your team. Emotional intelligence enables leaders to manage their emotions, respond empathetically to their team, and maintain composure during uncertainty. And you're going to have a lot of uncertainty. You're not going to have it easy. That's why leaders matter. The reason we need leaders is because things are not going to go okay. So leaders, there's a power of EQ in your leadership. And the reason this concept of emotional intelligence is so important is because if you are not self-aware, then you can't do very much. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize and understand your emotions. Do you know when you are changing the way that you act towards other people? No matter what's going on, leaders, you need to be like the duck. What is the duck like? The duck is proud on top of the water, looks like everything is going fine, but underneath the water, man, those feet are going. That duck is working harder than anybody else, but you wouldn't know it because the way that they carry themselves. John Wooden calls this poise. Poise is one of the foundations of leadership. And when John Wooden talks about poise in all of his books, but when he's talking about the pyramid of success, leaders have to have poise. Competitors have to have poise. So leaders, self-awareness is going to help you stay grounded and avoid being reactive. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you were reactive in a bad way? Somebody brought something to you and it just flustered you and you made a decision that was not the best for your team. Leaders, decision-making is what we do. High-stress moments are what we live for. So think about a leader who is self-aware. That leader, he or she, is going to acknowledge stress when it comes, but it's also going to use that stress to fuel the problem-solving process rather than spreading anxiety. So, Scott, I think leaders really just need to be self-aware. And we don't think about that. You and I talk about self-awareness a lot. And because I want to know, is Scott being self-aware in this process?
I think if we're talking about emotional intelligence, there is a sometimes push to do these types of assessments that help you better understand how you react in these certain situations. And I've done quite a few at this point, not only working with you, but additionally at work. And one of the things that I really think is interesting is if you're not fully growing yourself, you do these assessments and you learn, okay, this might be how I respond in that situation, or where my mind goes, but you don't go beyond that. It's like, okay, but how do you pivot? How do you shift? And one thing that always comes to my head is it's one of my favorite excerpts from Jocko Willink. His theme of good. Like when things aren't going well, you just say good. It doesn't matter the type of situation, doesn't matter the emotions that are flying, the frustration that's there, the annoyance that is there. He just says you have to say good. Because as a leader, you have to problem solve in that situation. You can't let your emotions get the better of you. You can't fly off the handle, even if something is beyond frustrating. And I for our listeners, I bet right now, and it's the same for me, there are so many instances just flying through my head where it's like, I was so frustrated at that. I was so frustrated at that, and I can think back to even before my journey, and it was just, how I responded terrible in those situations. And, it's not always sunshine and daisies now, but at the same time, being so aware creates more opportunities for that influence. Understanding that response is so critical and so important.
Have you read the book by Jon Krakauer called Where Men Win Glory? It's about Pat Tillman.
I have not. I will just add it to my ever-growing list.
Jon Krakauer does a great job talking about the heroic deeds of Pat Tillman and all the men that were with him in Afghanistan. Pat Tillman, he tells a story about the first time they were in combat. These were just kids. They were on a mission. All of a sudden, they started getting fired on. And so all these young guys who had never been in war before, they all jumped down and they were hiding and they were behind rocks and stuff like that, except for one crusty old guy who was the sergeant in charge. And he yelled at them and said, "Remember your training." That was a leader who was able to control his emotions in all the craziness. Imagine just being down and bullets whizzing by in their head. It's pretty crazy. And he's a rook. And as soon as he said that, all the guys rallied back and said, that's right. He was a leader in that moment. Team members look at leaders for stability. Are you a leader who is stable, who is giving people somebody to look to? For me, I always want my people to know that they can trust me if things are going wrong. Leaders, are you that kind of person? When I speak to my clients, one of the first things I always ask them is, do you say things in moments of craziness that you haven't thought of before? Because if you are, you need to go back and do a little bit more training. One of the things I tell all the people, whether it's young people or old people or anybody in between, is never say anything that you haven't already thought about. If you think, man, I'm gonna march into the office and I'm gonna give this person the piece of my mind, did you think about it? Leaders, think about things beforehand. You do not have the luxury of being somebody who does not self-regulate. A couple of the key dimensions of emotional intelligence are self-awareness and self-regulation.
I feel like we probably should do a whole podcast on just emotional intelligence. I feel like maybe we
should.
have actually. Yeah, we either have or we just, well, whatever. It's always a great topic to revisit. So Mo, why don't you take it away with that second point?
Point 2 is this. Leaders, embrace experimentation. Google has what they call the 20% time initiative. They have a program that encourages employees to spend 20% of their time working on innovative ideas that are unrelated to whatever their core responsibilities are. This really led to the creation of Gmail, Google Maps, AdSense, all the key products that you and I now are able to say, yeah, I use that. And why does that matter? Because encouraging experimentation among your team creates a culture of innovation and adaptability. Those are the kind of people that you want to have. When leaders support risk-taking, teams are more likely to pivot and find creative solutions to the challenges.
So experimentation is obviously incredibly important. Thomas Edison invented like over 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb before he had that one. And so there's failure and
Absolutely.
failure and failure. So then when it comes to your teams, how do we go about as leaders kind of building resilience and agility really into our teams when all of those experiments don't really go as planned, and maybe you have like a slew of, you've got a couple weeks or months where things they're just not going well. So how do you as a leader really just continue to encourage those individuals?
Experimentation is going to enable organizations to remain agile and responsive. And I mean, let's face it, we're in a rapidly changing world. So you have to give your people some autonomy. All of us are better than one of us. I want my team to give me ideas. I'm always sending stuff to my team saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Scott, when we talk about even the leadership, a podcast that we do, we're constantly talking about different ideas. And I want to know what's going on specifically with you and with people that you know. I'm always asking, what are people dealing with? I want to experiment with that. We might fall flat on our face. But I want to be, that's such a great point, Scott. I want to be like Edison. I want to mess it all up. And I want to go back and say, remember how crazy it was when we tried X, Y, and Z? What were we thinking? And so I come back to, again, one of my favorite examples and yours over the past several weeks, which is how did Elon Musk create something that he calls chopsticks, which is great. All of his names for things are great, to catch a rocket. I mean, who thinks of that? Well, it probably wasn't just him. It was probably his team. That's why when you saw the video of the chopsticks catching the rocket, it wasn't just Elon. It was a ton of people cheering and being excited because they were all in on that experimentation. Leaders, what are you doing? And let me give you, Scott, specifically to your question. This is how leaders can support experimentation. One is this. You need to foster creativity where you work. You need to think beyond the immediate tasks of things that need to get done, because that's what's going to lead to innovative problem solving. Let your people be creative. They all have fun things that they do. When they go home at the end of the day, they're either working on their cars or cleaning their house or doing projects, doing things that have nothing to do with work. And that's what they're good at. Find out what your people are good at. Ask them to be creative. The second one is this. Leaders, you need to allow your people to build agility. Teams that regularly experiment become better equipped for the unexpected challenges. If you bring your people around a table once a week, once a month, and say, hey, what are you guys thinking about? What are the craziest ideas? What's going to take our company to the next level? And you start letting those creative juices flow. Watch this. When something goes wrong, because you have had those conversations weekly or monthly or whatever it is, people are just going to jump up and say, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do this? You got to have those conversations. And the last one is this, Scott. For leaders to be supportive, We need to encourage risk taking. I love risk takers. You need to create a supportive environment that empowers your employees to explore the bold ideas, and they need to be able to do it without fear of failure. And yeah, it might cost your company some extra money. They might screw something up, but you know what's going to happen? They're going to bring those ideas, and those ideas are going to get better. And then they're going to self-regulate. There it is. They're going to self-regulate those ideas, and they're going to bring it because they know that you want those ideas. So, leaders, are you supportive of your people doing the things that would cause experimentation, which is going to make your company or your team within the company better?
So Mo, how do you balance then the idea behind, you have those that are willing to take risks and put themselves out there, but there are so many people who don't want to take risks because it's uncomfortable. So how do you foster that idea of risk taking with those individuals who are just fearful or terrified of the idea of stepping out into something uncomfortable, of taking a risk?
I'll give you just a couple. First of all, you need to reward effort, not just success. We have we're so hung up on success as leaders that we stifle people and their innovations and their experimentation. You need to celebrate the attempts, even if they fail. When somebody does something and it goes not the way that you expected, great. We're one more attempt closer to the light bulb. We're glad that Edison didn't stop. Formula 409, I think we've talked about before. Why is Formula 409, the cleaning solution, called Formula 409? Because it was the 409th attempt. We want people to attempt. We want people to fail. So leaders, frame failures as learning opportunities that are going to pave the way for breakthroughs, and watch the breakthroughs happen. Second is this: you need to provide the resources. Don't just say, yeah, go ahead and do it. You got to give your people what they need. What do they need? Your people need time. They need tools. They need funding. Give them those things. If you are a leader, it's always going to cost you more. It's going to cost you more time. It's going to cost you more tools. It's going to cost you more funding. Get over it. Be a leader. Do it. At the end of all my conversations, I always say this: how can I be helpful? What do you need from me? That's what I need to do. And lastly is that as a leader, you need to demonstrate openness to experimentation by piloting new approaches yourself. You need to jump in there and do it. You need to fail with your people. You need to be vulnerable. That way you can share the lessons that you learn. You can share the successes and failures, and your people are going to say, well, this is the normal thing. Even the supervisor is getting out there and doing these things. Trust me, do that. It's going to change your world.
Yeah. So it sounds like ultimately to be able to help those that don't necessarily enjoy risk taking, the idea is to model risk taking yourself, but additionally modeling the idea that it's okay when you fail. Because I'd argue that probably most people don't take risks because, when you take a risk, there's a high chance of failure.
Yes, there is.
And failure sucks. It's never fun, but it's so important. So modeling that potentially as that leader and letting them know, hey, like I fail all the time, would be a great way to maybe get those individuals in the swing of things, into the idea of, hey, yeah, you can take risks. It's okay if you fail. Now, one of the things that you talked about, I think it was your second point there, was the idea of, enabling them to kind of continuously learn. And that ties straight into our third point for today. So Mo, why don't you kind of take us into point 3?
Our third and final point today is this: prioritize continuous learning for long-term success. Here's one of my favorite books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. These principles that he talks about begin with the end in mind, sharpen the saw, and everything in between provide a framework for self-renewal and strategic adaptability. So leaders, you can develop a mindset of being proactive in your growth, and then you can teach your teams to embrace change. What Covey emphasizes in this book is building a solid foundation, both personally and as a team, but it's about consistency. It's about self-improvement every day. It's about focusing on long-term goals. So the real question is, how are you going to implement change on your team, especially coming up on a new year?
So if we're talking about continuous learning, and there's obviously certain ideas, right? And I work as an athletic trainer. So the idea of continuing education is something that I'm mandated to get, but not everybody has access to it. So how do we ensure or implement things that really make sure that all of our team members, regardless of their role, have access to those learning opportunities?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 3 quick ones, and here they are. The first one is this: you need to adopt proactive growth. So dedicate time as a professional to develop what needs to be done yourself, and then you got to have your team do that as well. So reading, attending workshops, certifications, you need to make that a priority, not just for yourself, but then ask your team, hey, what are you reading right now? I want to know how all the people in my life, I want to know what they're reading, because I want to make sure that I'm not missing something. Because if it's helping you get better, it could help me get better. We talked about doing things that are engaging. Man, I love certifications. If your people want to be certified in something, pay for it. You're the boss. You've got funds somewhere, and if you don't have them, find them. Model this commitment to inspire other people to be their very best and create habits like Covey talks about in his book, which is going to create a winning team for you. The second one is this: teach your team to embrace change. You should be talking about change in your business all the time. One of my favorite quotes is, the only constant is change. Use Covey's principles. There's 7 of them. That's why they're the 7 habits, to help your team focus on what they can control, and only on what they can control, no matter what the circumstances are. You cannot control the circumstances, but you can control the way that you go after those circumstances. So how do you do this, leaders? You got to have team discussions. You need to help people apply habits. You need to help them in both their work life, and you have to help them in their personal lives as well. You being a leader doesn't stop at 5 p.m. or whenever it is. When your people go home, you need to make sure that you are checking in on them and you are a leader all the time. And the third one is this: create a development plan. That is very important. Collaborate with your team members, the people that report to you and the people that you report to yourself, and set specific, measurable, and meaningful goals. At the end of every year, going into a new year, if you have not written down your goals, they're just dreams. You need to incorporate regular check-ins. You need to track the progress. Don't just do it and say, well, I got my goals done. Set a time. Are you going to look at them weekly? You're going to look at them once a month? You're going to look at them quarterly? I don't know. But you have to create a development plan. And if you don't have a development plan, do you think your people are going to have it? The answer is no.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. I think one of the things that everybody always forgets about too when it comes to continuing education is the power of reading a book. Everybody always thinks I got to attend a seminar, or I don't have, my wife and I, one of our goals one day is to attend a muster from Echelon Front. It's a great goal, but at the same time, that's a great learning opportunity, right? But I feel like people always think big, and you can think small. You can read a book. You can read a short book. It doesn't have to be long. You can link over to the Rising Tide blog and read an excerpt out of there, but you don't have to do something big. That even just reading a book can just create such a difference and such a change when it comes to just that continuous learning process. So Mo, before we head out for today, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I do. I want to start with a quote, and I'm going to read it here so I get it right. It's by Simon Sinek, and it says, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. Let me tell you why I love this. Your people are your bread and butter. They're the only thing that matters. And if you are not taking care of your people, if you are not helping them to be the kind of people who are building resilience, they're going to get burned out. And I hate burnout. If people are getting burned out, somebody in the leadership realm is not doing their job. I do not want my people to burn out. I always check in. How are you doing? What can we do? What can we change? You need to be there for your people. As leaders, our ability to grow and adapt is what drives the long-term success for ourselves, for our teams. And so we looked at some key principles today that hopefully are going to transform your leadership. But leaders, you need to work on your EQ. You need to embrace the way to experiment, and then you need to learn. You need to learn forever. Take the next step for a new year and consider what you need to do to apply these insights to your leadership to make sure that the journey continues on and you get better. And the question that I'll leave you with is, what steps will you take this upcoming new year to foster growth, innovation, and adaptability? Because your people deserve it. and you need to give it to them.
Powerful words to end on. So great big thanks to all of our listeners who are tuned in today. If you guys enjoyed the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or at our website, rtclc.com. Head over there, sign up for the newsletter. We've got some good specials coming up. But just remember that your guys' feedback helps us connect with more leaders and bring you guys valuable insights. Till next time, lead with purpose and stay authentic.